Well, hello there, guys and gals. Welcome to Miyagi Mornings, episode 114. Today we're going to talk about cryptocurrency. I try to do at least one episode a week, or limit to one episode a week on cryptocurrency, depending on how you look at it, I guess. But there's a lot of scuttlebutt around Bitcoin right now. It's becoming a potential world currency. And one thing you have to remember is that whatever the media tells you, it tells you that to make a reaction. When you hear something on the news, when you read something written by a mainstream media posting or something like that, you can never read it the way that we used to look at news, which it wasn't even that back in the 70s, but it was a hell of a lot closer. But back in the 70s, we did kind of look at news as kind of like a dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And the media was still a propaganda machine in the 70s. It definitely was. If you go back and listen to some of the old media stuff from back in the 70s and early 80s, you'll see that. But it was a lot closer to, we're telling you what's going on. You have to literally not listen to anything the media says as though it's reporting of the facts. And you have to look at everything the media tells you through the lens of what do they want me to do and why would they want me to do it. And you also have to look at it this way as well. The media is a machine, a tool, that is used and driven by the elites. That's why you can have, 800 different local media stations reporting the exact same thing on the exact same day at the exact same time. So you'll have like these little feel-good segments, for instance. I can't remember the comedian. It was a guy after Leno, I guess, on Tonight Show. Would have these things where like they'd have all these local Florida 12 and local Pennsylvania 15 or whatever, and they would all be like reading the exact same headline. Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry. That's why, because the machine is just a tool. So you really have to look even through, yes, there's people that make independent choices inside the media that have their own goals and agendas, but the primary coming in from the macro on the top is the elites of the world. So why would they want you to think what they're doing? So the two things that have this really kind of at a fevered pitch now is one, Donald Trump, media's favorite. The media is addicted to Donald Trump. They said they wanted nothing more than Donald Trump to go away, but man, they cannot let go. They are hardcore. I mean, I've seen heroin addicts give up heroin easier than CNN and MSNBC can give up Donald Trump. It is unbelievable. So Trump recently made a comment. It was a single comment along the lines of, I don't like Bitcoin, it's a scam because it threatens the dollar. Well, it can't be both, Trump. Sorry. It can't be a scam and compete with the dollar for the global reserve currency. You see there's a problem with that, right? So that has people all, well, if Trump says it does, even if he doesn't like it, then it might. And then El Salvador's president, I think it was El Salvador, came out and said he really wants to have Bitcoin be their national currency. Additionally, I think some other Central American nations, I believe it was Costa Rica and Panama, have expressed some interest in this as well. Now, again, this is all being filtered through, and you're being allowed to hear it, and it's being, amplified by the machine because they want a reaction from you. So what is that reaction? Well, to me, that reaction is that they want people to continue to be afraid of Bitcoin. And they want to believe, and they're, the main reporting, if you go type right now in like Google News or something like that, put Bitcoin reserve currency, the main pushback you're going to hear is there's no threat. There's no threat by Bitcoin to the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. They're just like the troops are lining up to defend the line. Now, based on everything I said, you might be thinking, well, Jack's about to drop on us. Yeah, Bitcoin's going to become the global reserve currency, displacing the dollar as such. No. And I'll tell you why. And it's probably not what anybody out there is thinking or certainly telling you right now. It's the same reason we have like 9,000 altcoins. The power of being able to print your own money is an irresistible power. Just back up for a second and think about it this way. How many crypto projects have you seen? That's a really cool project. If you're actually a thinking person, you also said, but why the hell do they need their own token or their own coin? If the project is really the thing, then why didn't you just use Litecoin for it? Or why didn't you, if you wanted privacy, why didn't you just use Monero or, R or something like that? Why do you have to make a new coin? Because funding your enterprise and your pockets by printing your own money is an irresistible power. So no major nation that has true wealth that can extract from that wealth through the printing press is going to make a global reserve currency out of Bitcoin. That doesn't mean it won't become a global reserve. And that's exactly what I think it shall become, is a global reserve. What's the difference? Right now, the reason you keep hearing people say it's gold 2.0, it's digital gold, is because gold is the world reserve. It is not the reserve currency, it is the world reserve. It is the wealth reserve of the world. It never changed, it has never changed, and the first thing in humanity's history since gold became the world wealth reserve to threaten the status of gold as the wealth reserve is Bitcoin. What do I mean by this? Take a central bank of a major wealthy nation and tell me they do not have gold on the balance sheet. They all do, and significant amounts of it. And then all of the central banks are actually made up of the member banks, which are the consumer banks and the investment banks and the lending institutions that you deal with. They're really in charge of the economy through the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, etc. And they all have significant global reserves of gold on their balance sheets. All of them. So, you don't have to have the United States adopt Bitcoin, or China adopt Bitcoin, or Russia adopt Bitcoin, or Germany adopt Bitcoin, or El Salvador adopt Bitcoin as its currency for it to become a global wealth reserve used by nations and banks. You don't need to pass any laws. Federal Reserve Bank of the United States right now can write a check for $50 billion and buy $50 billion worth of Bitcoin tomorrow, and they're in jack diddly shit that anybody can do about it at all. And so can the European Central Bank. And so can all these central banks and what have you in South American countries or African countries or Asia like China or Japan or whatever. All these central banks have so much autonomy, they can pretty much buy anything they want. That's a lot easier than changing a law. And I think that what's being done right now is an attempt to suppress the value of Bitcoin in a very coordinated manner because, well, a lot of these folks are realizing that they're late to the party. And this is how this goes down. A central bank of a significant nation, probably more significant than El Salvador. Not that El Salvador putting Bitcoin on the national balance sheet wouldn't be significant. It'd be hugely significant, but wouldn't be that significant. But if you have a Germany, right, even though they have a European Central Bank, they still have individual banking institutions within Germany. They have a national balance sheet, etc. Just Germany were to put it on the balance sheet, or if the EU Central Bank were to put it on the balance sheet, or the Chinese were to put it on their reserve, put it on as a reserve on their balance sheet, or the Russians or the Chinese. See, any one of them that does it, they'll all do it. They'll all do it. It doesn't even have to actually happen. All it has to do is be plausible. If credible reports come out, for instance, that Vladimir Putin is putting Bitcoin on Russia's balance sheet, the EU Bank and the American Central Bank will immediately follow. And once that happens, the Chinese jump in, and the Japanese jump in, and the Asian Pacific nations jump in, and Central American, South American nations jump in, and everybody puts it on the balance sheet. And it immediately becomes a global reserve of wealth, which in many ways it already is. It's just not being used by these nation states yet as such. And I'll add to this. You don't even know that. You don't even know that. If you believe that your government is actually obligated to tell you everything that they're actually holding as a reserve of wealth, then you probably listen to too much TV set talk and not enough YouTube of alternative media people like myself. I'm sorry. If you believe this, you just... I don't even know what to say to a person that really thinks, well, we know everything the Federal Reserve is holding because we can audit their balance. Have you never heard of the Audit the Fed Act? Do you think that there's a reason for it? Do you think Ron Paul just thought it sounded cute Or do you think that maybe there might be some things that they're doing beyond just maybe the money that you see is not all the money that there is? There's just other things going on. Do you think the most powerful and most wealthy people in the world might do some things and not really give a shit whether you like it or not, and might not disclose it to you, and might do those things in their own self-interest? Now, for those of you that are like, I don't know that, the American, central bank, the Federal Reserve, Canada's Fed, or Chinese central bank or EU central bank would do this. They would actually buy this currency. I would ask you, why not? Why wouldn't they? It doesn't cost them anything. It doesn't cost them any money at all. How much Bitcoin would you buy right now if I gave you a blank check for a loan you never had to repay? Let me say it again. I want you to really think about this. How much Bitcoin would you buy right now if I handed you a blank check and said you fill that check out, buy as much Bitcoin as you want, do whatever you want with it. You never have to pay me back. But when you write the number on that check, that's the number you get. You write $1 million, you get $1 million. You write $1 billion, you get $1 billion. You want $100 million? Put it on there. You can spend as much money as you want, and you never have to pay it back. Because you do understand that's how fractional reserve banking works, right? They never pay the money back. Especially at the top level. They can literally write a check that draws against nothing and has no money due back. So why wouldn't they? And what you'll say, and if you're a thinking person, you're on the right track, is because they don't want Bitcoin to succeed. Have you ever heard the term, that horse has left the barn, before? There's a point where even if you're diametrically opposed to a thing, you accept the thing for what the thing is. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now around this that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense as well. So if you're watching this on Odyssey or YouTube, instead of the podcast recap, it's Tuesday the 8th. And today's survival podcast will be a roundtable show. This is my podcast. This is what you're looking at right now. If you're watching the video, it's not my podcast. A lot of people get confused about that for some reason. My podcast is audio. It goes out in Stitcher and iTunes and all that good stuff. It's usually about an hour to an hour and a half every day. Today we're going to do a roundtable discussion. And I'm going to break down some other things that are going on in the cryptocurrency world that I also believe are designed to suppress the price of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically. Now, if you suppress the price of Bitcoin all the way down to $15,000, more than half away from where it is right now, it doesn't actually hurt Bitcoin. Now, it's hard for you to get your head around. Everybody wants a Lambo in the moon and whatever. You're talking about a currency that was created about 11 years ago that was called completely and totally worthless. And was called that over and over and over again. That has been pronounced dead so many times. There's actually a thing called the Bitcoin obituaries at 99bitcoins.com. I'll put a link in the video notes. And you go read it hundreds and hundreds of times. That people who were way more important than me in the global world, right, have come out and said Bitcoin is dead, including like heads of central banks, Federal Reserve Chairman, bigwigs in Goldman Sachs, etc. Pronounced it dead and gone. When it was, $100, $300, $600, $1,000. Anybody that's been in this a while knows that Bitcoin's been through every Mount Gox falling apart, Silk Road. Like, it is not that big a deal unless you took your life savings, put it in there, and you need the money back next week if Bitcoin goes 15 grand. It doesn't help get rid of Bitcoin. It actually brings more people over time after the shock wears off into Bitcoin because, it's like time to buy in again. Who does it benefit? This is the question we always have to ask ourselves. If you can write that giant check, but there is some limit on it. The reason I told you any number you want, because their limit's bigger than the number that goes in most people's heads. Because most people aren't sociopaths, and they actually realize that money represents power, and too much power is bad. So most people probably have a number like, even at $1 billion, people start to feel a little bit uncomfortable with that much power if they're not sociopaths. And I know you're out there, I'll get $100 billion, I don't give a shit. Yeah, because it's not real. But if you are a sociopath, if your goal is to control society, and if you realize that Bitcoin has an inherently limited supply, right? It is hard capped. There is only so much. Right now, if the central bank goes out and tries to buy all the Bitcoin on the market, they will literally push Bitcoin to like $1 million in days. That's how fundamentally limited the supply is. And once we hit that final Bitcoin being mined, there is no more. We have at 21 million. And there's probably more like 18 million Bitcoin that will ever be available because of how much has been lost. And there's probably like at least $10 million that is not getting sold no matter what. Or 10 million Bitcoin, they're not getting sold no matter what. So you got about 8 million Bitcoins that at any price are even up for grabs. Because the wealthiest of the wealthy have snapped to, if I don't ever sell it, I don't ever pay taxes on it. And there's ways to get cash flow from it without selling it. I can loan it and I'll pay tax on the interest that I get on the loan, but I'm only paying it on that. I'm not paying on the fundamental underlying value. Or I can actually borrow against it and use the next loan to repay the first loan once I have a certain amount of money. So the people that are running that game, they're not selling. People like, if you've been in like me since 2014, you're not selling. Do you understand the issue there? So the check isn't limited in how much they can write it for. The quantity that can be acquired with the check is where the limit is. So what do? You suppress the price. You get your boy Elon to go buy a bunch of it, but once he buys a bunch of it, you get him to start talking nonsense about energy usage. You get your dumbass, completely co-opted Mark Cuban to start talking about Dogecoin. And then you get your morons on Fox News calling it Dogecoin. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They can't even pronounce it right. But all of a sudden, it's like, well, you should be looking at Dogecoin, right? Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Billions and billions of new ones every year. That's the place to go, right? You suppress this. You have Russian hackers get millions of dollars for the Colonial Pipeline, and then the FBI magically figures out the seed phrase and gets it back. They're such badass hackers, man. They're like super hackers, man. They wear a dark hood. They live in a basement in Russia, right under Putin's pool, man. And they're like the most sophisticated hackers ever. And they let their seed phrase get known by the FBI. And they got the money, and they had it in a wallet address, and they left it almost all of it in one address. They didn't move it. They didn't take any countermeasures with it. They just let it sit there. And the FBI magically farted out a 13-word seed phrase and got it back. Okay, sure. Tune into the podcast today to find out more about that, to find out how ransomware attacks work. But this is my prediction. Bitcoin will probably get pushed down further before it goes up, and every time it goes down, I'll buy some more. Bitcoin will never be the global reserve currency. It will be the global wealth reserve held by every major institution in the world. And if you were those people, and you knew this, you'd want as much of it as you could get, and you'd use any tools and leverage you could to push negative pressure on the price so that you could buy it. Force out the weak hands, take the whole table. That's the plan. I'll catch up to you tomorrow with another one.